And hey everyone, I'm Jason Hu. I'm the founder of NextEd. We have those speakers set up, but they are not connected. So if you cannot hear us talking, let us know. We'll speak up.
You can just move forward as well.
Yeah, for sure. So a little bit introduction of myself. I'm a founder in the Bay Area. My company is called NextEd, and we are building the agentic workspace for marketers and advertisers. We are backed by Andreessen and other VCs in the Valley. And but today I'm here to learn from a much more grown-up founder, Marcelo. And
not that much more.
So let's kick things off. So Marcelo, like I know Juan gave a high-level introduction. I also want to hear your version of your personal history. What inspired you to create remote.com, and as a high-level introduction, what does remote.com do?
Yeah. So I'll start with the last part. We do global HR and payroll. We pay people across the world, essentially. We started this company for our sort of motive was, we realized that opportunity is not everywhere. Talent is. Right? You have great people in all countries and all places across the world, but it doesn't mean that you have the best companies out there, or that the companies that are offering comp packages or work conditions are probably not the ones that people would want in a lot of countries in the world. And so that ultimately results in two things. Either you have to fly out, leave your life behind, sometimes your family, and start anew, or you just have to deal with whatever is available locally. So we wanted to solve that. The way to solve that is something called employer of record, where we are the de facto local employer, and but we act as a bridge between, if there's a company in the US that wants to work with someone in France, then they can hire the person through us. And we handle all stuff like benefits, social security, payroll, and whatnot. Or if you do have your own entity, we can also just handle payroll across the world. This means that over 100 countries in the world, we run our own stuff. From legal, tax, equity, payroll, everything is in-house. You have the best lawyers, the best specialists in the world that handle any kind of questions, any kind of scenario, good or worse. And everything is now automated because we've obsessively accumulated all the knowledge across the years, and we've documented everything thoroughly. And so now with the advent of AI, it helps us to build an unparalleled product, which is also offered through infrastructure. So if you know probably the company called Workday, it's a fairly big company, their payroll offering is actually us. It's offered through the API that we offer to the world. That's it in a nutshell. We're very crazy, ambitious people. I'm a tech guy. Ended up building a lot of different things across the company. I'm always excited about building what's new and what's hard. That's what keeps me awake.
That's super awesome. Would you mind sharing a bit more about your personal background? What did you do before starting remote.com?
Yeah.
And as Juan was sharing, it's not a regular time when you started the company. So what inspired you to start remote.com at that time, and why are you doing this business?
Yeah. So my co-founder and I were actually friends for 15 years now. We started this company in 2019, early 2019. We had built many projects together across the years, many inconsequential things that would not lead anywhere. But we really wanted to build something that we could put our weight behind. This means build a product that helps people, it changes people's lives, that actually enables something in the world. And it took us quite a few years to get to what that product could look like. And once we got there, I was an engineer my whole life. I was a programmer, CTO, VP of engineering a few times. And at some point, it just made sense to start. Because, there's, my wife, as one said, my wife was pregnant, but there's never a great time to start anything. There's always something. There's always a reason for you not to do something. It's never a perfect timing. And so, my wife said, we talked and I said, look, it's going to get crazy. And she's like, yep, but it's always going to be crazy. So we just went ahead and did it.
That's awesome. And I can particularly relate to the point you were making that you're building all these random inconsequential stuff before actually starting remote.com. As a founder myself, like before starting Nextset, I was also hacking at least like between 5 to 10 different smaller projects that didn't go anywhere, but I think that really contribute to me actually being a founder, right?
Yeah.
So I'm curious personally, like, what do you do before, like, these inconsequential projects? Do you think they contributed to you, founding like a big company, or just like
absolutely. I believe I'm a deterministic guy.
Deterministic?
Deterministic.
Deterministic, yeah.
So I believe that, you get to a certain point because you did certain things that, like a domino effect that led you to that point. I think one of the things that gave myself and my co-founder sort of the confidence to start this very complex business, and by the way, like we raised in total like 500 million to build this business. It's a behemoth of the business. We effectively have over 100 companies across the world because every country has its own entity. But we learned to handle problems. And we built different things, different projects, things that led nowhere. Like you said, like the whole cemetery in my repos.
What are some notable examples?
We built, the app Find My on the iPhone that everyone uses today. We built it like 3 years before it ever came out.
It's pretty cool.
And it was awesome. And you know what? We built it and we were like, oh, what do we do with it now? And it's like, we just built something else. And we kept building and we kept building and we kept building. And we have all kinds of different apps. I built an app for speech therapy with my wife.
Oh, wow.
Sometimes mobile apps, sometimes web apps, for all kinds of different purposes. We built an analytics tool because one of our projects needed analytics. So we ended up building a secondary thing that ended up, again, nowhere. But one of the reasons why it ended up nowhere, because I was in Portugal, my co-founder is in the Netherlands.
Oh.
And we were like, okay, so if we start selling, who's going to report taxes? Like, where are we going to incorporate this? Because this is Europe, this is not US. Meaning that like one of us is going to get screwed. And so always ended up like, oh, it's a cool app, but is it like, our question was, is this life changing? So if we launch this app, we're going to go through all the hurdles of setting up a company, selling this. Is it worth the distraction? Because also, by the way, these are like our, side jobs. Like were not our jobby jobs. They weren't paying for anything. Yeah. But ultimately, it sort of told us that you sharpen the tool, right?
Yeah.
And you get better, and you get better. You get faster. You start to understand most of all what matters. Because at the beginning, like the first few apps, everything matters. Like this button has to be right, and instead of one button, I have 10. And what if I also do the other things? And you don't know the most important lesson, that is you have to keep the main thing the main thing. Mm-hmm. And that takes all these tiny lessons, they pile up into you learning essentially to see in the dark.
That makes so much sense. I can relate a lot to that. And I also find it very interesting because the inconsequential projects you were doing before, I think they are very typically what tech people, engineers would do, like some apps, some dashboards. It's like all the YC startups, like the young people, they begin doing these. I think those are relatively easy to think about if you're an engineer. But the actual thing you're doing right now, remote.com, is like heavy, a lot of logistics, details, setting up entities. I don't think the normal engineers would want to deal with those like inelegant real world details. I'm curious, you sort of explained how you're interested in this problem, right? But like, what are the learnings? Because I feel like remote.com is fundamentally different with the smaller softwares you built before.
Well, not even the same galaxy. Yeah. There's always a lot of money if you can fix a lot of pain.
Right.
And what we realized is that global payroll, global employment, it was not solved, is not solved.
Yes.
And so ultimately, if you want to address, if it's not solved, but every single company out there needs it, they are willing to pay for it. And so we thought, okay, so the path here is you're going to build the best solution possible for this, meaning it has to be simple, it has to be high tech, and it has to be fast. And so, but we're also talking about this, it sounds like, yeah, it's a good cliche, but you have to think about the fact that all the things that are beneath it, we're talking on a per country basis, how to do taxes, how to do payroll, for people in different, if you're in a CBA or union or something just completely different. If you think the US is complex, tax-wise or payroll-wise, if you look in Europe, then you're not going to have a great surprise. And on top of this, there's employment law. There are law changes. There are tax implications. All of it in every single country in different languages across the world. And so you have to make this huge behemoth look easy and feel easy and integrate easily. There's no single API for payroll. And of course, we wanted to build it. Now, is it hard? It's fucking hard. But that's where the pot of gold is.
That makes a lot of sense. So I have a handful of questions. There's a lot of the payroll, the HR, the legal side of things, and also you guys have the clean SaaS like technology part. What's the percentage of work of the breakdown of the two? It's like majority you need to set up the company entities, or the tech part is also fundamentally important.
Oh yeah, they're symbiotic. If we at the very core of our business, there's something that AI is not able to eat up yet and won't in the next 10, 20 years. Just the regulatory requirements. It's how do you submit taxes? It's how do you make sure that the legal advice is correct? How do you make sure that the categorization of payroll is correct from a regulatory standpoint? And that is, it's a moat. It's a hard thing that is it still requires interaction with the world. Yeah. And so until robots can literally go to, the IRS and say, here's my filings. And it's going to be a while. And so at the core of it, we had to make this very standardized, very operational, make sure that everything is documented. And then on top of it, every single thing that flows the data from the people, the payroll systems, the HR systems, all through that trickle down this complex, maze of software, then this is where AI and automation kicks in. And it makes sure that, if you were opening up a company, you raise some money now and you say, hey, I'm going to hire across 10 different countries, then you can do it within 24 hours with remote, rather than months and worry about where you're going to pay taxes and whatnot. No, you just find the 10 people, whatever they are, you come to remote and in a matter of hours, they're hired.
That makes sense. So now I want to delve a bit more into the history of the company, right?
Yeah.
You said it's founded in 2019. I see that in around a year or a little bit less than a year, you guys raised a very big seed round. And so the growth is pretty exponential afterwards. So in the few years of you building the company, I wonder, do you segment into different stages? What's a journey like? Like, I know like seed round company is very, very different from like Series C or Series D. Yeah. And what's the journey of growing with a company?
Well, you don't feel it. You know that feeling where you're looking at the clock, and it feels like it's not moving, but it actually is. So it's fundamentally that. And all you see is like all the shit happening all the time, and the shit show that every single thing is, and it never changes. It just sort of slightly differs. The people change a bit, but it is still ongoing. So meaning, there are different phases. One is, you're trying to put the right people in the right place. That is always there. Right? It'll always be the case.
Or I can put it in this way. How do you get your first client?
Oh, okay. So I think usually that's a very tricky question, because in many cases, people build a solution looking for a problem.
Yeah, especially HR payroll, it's like core to the company's operations. You want to hand to someone you trust.
Yeah, but as you're building a business, there's a lot of people that have cool ideas, but they're not really solving a big pain. So it's what I said, like, you're building a solution that is looking for a problem. If you are in this vein, then you're going to struggle to find the first customer, because then you're going to have to, knock on everyone's door and say, hey, can you use this? Like, is there, and that, it's not doable, but it's going to take an endless amount of time. The other approach is you find a problem, and if you find the problem, then you find the people that are suffering from the problem, and these are going to be your first customers. That is, you have to understand the kind of problem you're solving and why do you have the right to solve it. If that is clear, then you found your customers. That's how you find your first customer. And of course, some will be, somewhat allergic to the fact that you're a young company, but that will always be the case. Like, we went from selling to super small businesses to now selling to multinational companies like, SpaceX and Burger King and, Toyota, BYD, and all these businesses now, they're behemoths. But if we, at the early stage of remote, we had 0 credentials. But the way you do it is by doing it. You go one step at a time. So you convince a company of 1 person to buy from you. Then you go to a company of 2 people and say, hey, we have customers. And then you go to the company of 3 people and you say, hey, well, we have already 2 people. And then you make your journey along the way. It is always, you're always going to get a lot of no's. But that's a journey.
So for the first few clients, so you mentioned they're super small business, are people around you that you just talk to, and they have the problem, they just build a solution, create new entities, and solve their issues, and that's it. Also, I think I'm curious because it's a fundamentally multi-nation thing. There could be companies in a country that want to set up offices in all the random countries in the world. Do you simultaneously spin up entities all around the world, or you focus on companies in a country that want to operate in B?
No, so we help some companies spin up their own entities, but not everyone. So some companies, they will just hire through us because we already have our entity there. And so we make the link between the person and the company. So they don't need to set up the entity. Or they already have the entity and we just run the payroll for them locally. Right? So and some companies, what happens is that, they start with us in the first model, which is employee of record. And let's say that you're an American company, you want to hire 3 people out of France. And through us, great, you don't need an entity there. We take care of everything for you. We employ the people, they'll just work with you normally. And, those 3 people become 50 or become 100. And you say, well, you know what, Marcelo, I would prefer to now have my own entity in France, and we can help you set up that entity and then just run payroll for you. So that's the way that usually works.
So it's a set up a customer relationship, and then as your clients grow up, you actually naturally expand the business. Because they trust you already. I see. Would you say many of your biggest clients are grow with your clients kind of model? Is it
that's the easiest, right? It's the very easiest, very, 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 because VSP customers, very small businesses or small businesses, they are more risk tolerant, right? So, they will start up, they don't have a lot of requirements, they'll start with a couple of people, but then they'll grow, and they will grow with you. So it's very natural expansion. It's cheaper for you as a business to grow through expansions too.
Absolutely. Interesting. So in this 0 to 1 stage, what's the biggest challenge you made? It seems like finding customers is not the biggest challenge for you.
It wasn't, because we started by the problem, right? And in order to find the problem, we found the customers. The 0, there's the 0. I usually say there are 3 phases: 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 10. 0 to 1 is you got nothing, you need to build something. It's a super chaotic phase. But honestly, in 0 to 1, nothing matters. The only thing that really matters is you making the thing happening. Now, if it's by, doing 3 meetings or no meetings, no documents, no nothing, does not matter. The thing does not exist until it exists. Once you're in one, you should at some point make sure that you can clean up your house so that it can keep scaling. Usually there's a period that I usually call the 1 to 2. That is a period of still growth, but you need to make sure that certain things are in place. Cross the T's, dot the I's. Make sure the operational standards are there. Make sure that people know which platform to use in a certain way. Otherwise, you're going to lose a lot of time. And there's a period where you go from 2 to 10, meaning, okay, we make the thing happen, 0 to 1. We cleaned up the thing, and now we can fly. Those are typically the 3 phases.
So for remote.com, 0 to 1 is like the first year before you raise a seed round? 1 to 2 is like...
Honestly, some days I think we're still at 0 to 1.
Nice.
Some days I really believe we're 0 to 1. Some days, company of like 10,000 people comes to us and wants to buy from us, and I'm like, oh shit, this is 100. But in those moments, sometimes it makes you realize that you still have a lot of room to grow and a lot to learn. And so that's when you're going back to 0 to 1.
So it's not really like an objective criteria, it's more like a mindset.
Correct.
I see.
That's why, you get that mantra from Jeff Bezos. It's always day one.
I see. So after you, and I think you guys have a good businesses, like before you raise any funding, right? It's like business with very clear need.
Yep.
You're 100% willing to pay for it.
Yep.
And you make margin, and you're like, I don't know if you're profitable, but like probably have positive cash flow before you raise any venture funding.
Actually not.
Oh.
We became cash flow positive last year.
I see.
So like 6 years.
I see. So what's your decision to raise venture money, right? Because this is something that can generate. Generate
We
cash
didn't
flows.
want to.
Oh.
Because we knew we had worked for VC companies before, and we knew that there's a lot of expectation when you raise money.
100%.
And sometimes it's a big distraction. But we also realized soon enough that if you want to build a company across the world, if you want to build an entity in over 100 countries in the world, if you want to build an infrastructure that supports a very complex thing, I'm sorry to say, but you're going to need a lot of money. And that's what, open our eyes to, we're really going to need a lot of money.
I see. So you've begun onto the venture-backed funding raise. How's the fundraising experience for you? I know you raise a lot and trying to talk to your VCs. Could you share a bit more about the journey?
Well, up until Series C, pretty straightforward, no issues whatsoever. Yeah, great traction, great growth.
What kind of story do you tell? It's just like global EOR, payroll, that's it? Or
it used to be. We never even had a deck until Series B.
Wow.
We just raised on the growth of the business. Series C was slightly different story, because by the time we started to fundraise for Series C, it was 2021 economic collapse. Like all VCs started to pull term sheets around the world.
Were you in a very money constrained situation, or it's okay for you to not raise for like 2-3 years? It's fine.
We needed to raise. We had, in Series C, we were burning still considerable cash. So if we wanted to keep growing at the speed that we were growing, we had to raise. It was still like first 3 years of the business or so. So it was super early days, and we needed to grow to continue to build, expand the country across the world, the company across the world. But it was weird for us, for our standards, because we used to raise in like 2 weeks. And Series C took a month, which...
Why is that? Because of the general macro environment?
Yeah, because, we started to have conversations, and all of a sudden, it was like on the news that, everyone was doing layoffs. And also there was a war starting, and everyone was afraid of economical collapse. And so we started hearing stories of founders saying that a lot of VCs were pulling term sheets last minute. And we're like, oh, is this going to be a bumpy ride or what? But ended up being somewhat smooth. But it was just the one that told us like, okay, money is not. It was the end of ZIRP, zero interest rates, and we're like, okay, money is not free anymore, and so the world needs to brace for impact.
So it's just like putting a little bit more effort than.
Correct.
But it's also fine.
Yeah. Well, it also, the good thing about it is that it cleared all these businesses that were just vaporware.
That makes sense because you're like some of the competitors who don't have like a solid business.
Correct.
I see. Yeah. And also I noticed that you haven't raised for a few years.
Yeah.
Compared with the early stages of a company, it's like, every year you raise like exponentially larger rounds.
Yeah.
And in the past few years, you're not raising anymore. Like, what's thoughts behind it?
Well, first of all, you raise. Why should you raise? Because you're selling a part of your company, and you should raise if you need the cash to use as a lever to do something. We are cash flow positive. That means that more money comes in than we spend, which means that you're able to finance the things that you want to do. So ultimately, in a world where money is a constraint, you selling portions of your company to at a valuation or at a percentage that may or may not be interesting to you is a huge distraction. And so in our case, there's no appetite, there's no upside for it. We have the money we need. We have actually more than we need, and we never ended up. I swear it's not the police.
Just a few seconds, it's fine.
And if it's the police, it's not for me. And so what happened is that after we raised. That's amazing. Okay. So after we raised Series C, we actually we raised about 300 million. We actually never spent the money.
Oh, never touched it till now?
No, we're not like, we're making more money than we're spending.
Oh, nice.
So, but it's important to understand is we run a very big business. We are an employer record, we run payroll, we process over 6 billion in payments on a yearly basis. It's a lot of money that you need to move. So you need to have a war chest for these things.
What's war chest?
War chest is, shit hits the fan, it's the money you have tucked away under the mattress.
I see.
Right? So in case the world goes to shit again, which is seemingly happening every 6 months now.
Like strategic reserve.
Yes.
I see. Is it because of you have passed the infrastructure build out phase that you have basically companies and payroll set up for all the companies that you're into operating, and further on it's more like increase the profit margin, earning more money?
So it's like the foundations of a house. It's always the hardest, right? You have to do a lot of work, a lot of money. Like it seems like it moves slowly, but once you go past a certain threshold, then things will start to smooth out. And we put a lot of effort into early days in the company. We continue to do so, but it enabled us to glide now instead of having to worry about, hey, do we want to, do we need to stop doing things or raise more money?
That makes sense. So what's a future plan of capitalization, like going IPOs or being acquired, or like I know you have a lot of external investors. Do they have like certain expectations on you with their own thoughts?
Yeah. So remote is a long-term business. Like our vision is to build a legendary company. That is done over time. In order to do so, you have to be in business long enough. We're in business for 7 years. So I don't know, as far as the exit, I don't know, like IPO is certainly a possibility. I think we have the conditions for it. It's not really appealing. If you look at the markets, you have any idea of what's going on in the markets these days?
So the multiple on public market is not good?
It's not that it's not good, it's like completely random.
SpaceX.
It's random. You have companies that are valued 100 to 100x, and then you have companies that are trading at 1.5x. Revenue.
PED.
So like it's the pricing, also with the advent of AI, everything is priced based on opportunity. So you could have an amazing company with amazing profile, doing great. It's going to be priced like shit. And then you have like a clunky business, but is operating on AI, is on negative margins, but it's going to be priced 100x. So I have no idea what this could mean for remote today, honestly. I think we would be fine, in truth be told, but I have zero motivation to go through it. Meaning, the reason why you should go public is because you have access to more cash.
Yeah.
Right? You can use the markets to finance things that you want to do.
Yeah.
And right now, the things that we want to do, we are doing it. And so until we go through this next phase, so all about infrastructure, we're heads down. Now, as far as other options, selling the company or going bankrupt, it's always available. Now, it's something that I work very hard not to go through. So hopefully not.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I definitely want to delve into your view on the future. But I think before we go into that, I'm also very interested in like the competitive dynamics you go throughout the journey of a company. Because for a problem, as people are very willing to pay for it, like very clear pain points, there are going to, and also a big market, right? There are going to be a lot of competitors. Like Deal is, I think they are relatively famous in the Bay Area, and a bunch of other folks. I think they started sort of in the same time as you guys. First of all, I'm curious, why do you think this type of business started popping up at the time of your guys' founding years around 2020, 2019? And what's the journey and the growth?
Because I think it's a snowball effect, right? We started up, we had a clear narrative, and it also raised the awareness to the space. And then more people started to pile up on the idea, which is normal. It's a great space, it's a great area to work on. As far as competition, it's fierce competition. I always think that there's two ways you build a company. You build a product and eventually you go to market with it, or you go to market and then you build a product. I think our competitors first build a go-to-market, and they're still building out a product. I think that we took a more principled approach by building a great product and then going to market. Is competition, I think it's very healthy. It's always a validation of the market. And we operate in a market that is big as the world itself. It's payroll. Literally every company in the world needs payroll. It keeps you on your toes. Of course, it's important to understand that you have to be on your own journey, that you are doing something different, and going for different values as well. And I guess that's it. I don't get distracted that much with competition. Nice. Of course, if I'm in a competitive scenario, I always want to win. But
I see. So why does this kind of business don't exist, let's say, in 2009? Because global hiring is always a thing, right?
Global hire is always a thing. But I believe that there was a catalyst with COVID that taught people that you could actually run businesses distributedly. Even if it's like multiple offices, what happened is that it now got a name. It's a distributed company. It's a remote company, or it's just, hybrid offices. They got names, they got designations. And that became a thing on itself.
So before this kind of thing that you guys pioneered, people were like, okay, like Coca-Cola set up an entire new office in Europe and it's like operating on its own, like a sub-company kind of thing.
They would not, in many cases, they wouldn't even do it. They were like, it'd be too complex. Or they would just hire a couple of people in a not very compliant way.
I see. But the thing you guys innovate is like, it's like remote working, like how people in different countries can collaborate remotely.
Well, can be paid and employed.
Paid and employed. Just want to understand, because multinational companies are, ever since like the colonial period, like Portugal is like, setting up VOCs, right? Like it's not a new thing. Like I'm just trying to understand why you guys pop out at this crazy speed.
Yeah, precisely because these businesses, to give you an idea, in order for you to build a company in a different country, it would cost you an average of $100K just to set up entity. Then to employ people, to run payroll and all that, it's more than that on a yearly basis. And so we automated all of it. And that's what made it so easy for companies to just open up and start working in other countries. It was now as simple as going through a few buttons.
Yeah. Got it. And so I think you guys the earliest among, let's say, the few of your main competitors to do this?
Yep.
Or do you think timing matters in this kind of?
Yeah, always. Timing matters, but the one thing that really matters is execution. Like, you can be earliest to the game, but if you don't execute, you're going to be outweighed. It's very simple.
I see. So, like, how is execution affect this?
Well, if you don't get the best product out there, if you don't sell, others will sell for you and will build for you. It's quite easy. Like, if time is never a friend, right? And time eats away into what you ship or not, and if you don't, then someone else will. If you don't sell, someone else will. And nowadays, even with AI, like, time has been compressed.
Yeah.
Because AI will do a lot for you in a very short period of time. So this means that what used to take experts, years to accumulate the knowledge to do something, now, an 18-year-old guy out of, the Bay Area can just vibe it in a weekend.
100%.
So it's very different.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So Jason and I have talked about this quite a bit, and as I've gotten to know some of the people here, actually, by a quick show of hands, here's a founder. Can I please see? You're working on some? Yeah, so it's quite a few. And I know, like, people are always thinking in terms of, like, do I optimize the current go-to-market machine, and do I adopt the latest tech to send more emails or do better ads? But then also, like, how do I build something that has explosive product market fit where it doesn't matter, how much I optimize this? And I guess, Jason, it must be also what's on your mind as you go through these questions. I wonder if, not just like on a biographical perspective, but like prescriptive almost, Marcelo, if you have any advice for people how to either identify those trends that are happening right now that they can ride, or how they can, maybe they've already identified them, but how they can execute really well upon them, because we're sitting at a crux of a lot of interesting things that are happening where there is explosive product market fit and people are missing out on some of them. So do you have kind of any advice of how you've been able to identify those and ride them?
Yeah, so let's take the example of AI. Right now, the world exploded in a new full vertical of serving AI. So the way to think about it is you have to follow the supply chain very easily. OpenAI, let's start with as an example, is a wrapper on NVIDIA. They depend on NVIDIA to serve. NVIDIA depends on TSMC. TSMC is a wrapper on ASML. ASML is a wrapper on pure silicon. Right? So this is a way for you to understand that the supply chain shows you all the opportunities to go into. And then if for each of these companies that are now in this big boom of a market, you start to distill the different areas that they depend upon, then you will absolutely find an area where, holy fuck, I could solve these for these guys, right? NVIDIA on itself has like a massive supply chain issue of parts. Each graphic board has like 5,000, 10,000 parts. Plastic components, metal components, you name it, quartz, like a lot of this stuff has a company behind it. And so the opportunities are to understand how can you do better, or how can you serve a gap or a problem within that segment, which is fundamentally what we did, right? We started to understand, if companies need to hire the best people in the world, and if these people are not sitting next to the companies, then what needs to be true, right? You need to be able to pay them. Okay, in order to pay them, what to happen? You need to do it compliantly. You need to do it compliant. You need an employment thing, and so on and so forth. So it's all about just like separating the full supply chain, breaking it down, and then understanding which part you can serve and in which part you know enough that you can build a solution for.
So, and then do you have any advice on how to actually capitalize on those? So that's like on the identification side.
Yeah.
But then how do you think about committing into something, even if you're not going to see any early success? It's like, oh, this is the right thing. Let's go ahead and build it. Versus like seeing something and saying like, we're not going anywhere good. Let's just bail on that, do this other thing instead.
Yeah. Well, that's the superpower. This when you know that you found a problem and not a solution instead of a problem, right? I think the superpower of founders is to see in the dark, is to see the thing that no one else sees. It is you understanding the supply chain and knowing that there's a piece that you're seeing that no one else is seeing, that you deeply believe in, that no one else maybe believes in, and then you can solve it. Right? And so that moment when it hits, when you really understand the thing that no one else does, and then your job is to get others to go along the journey, is to raise the cash to go solve it, is to hire the people that to go along with the crazy journey with you. Because, the same thing happened to me. We identified this, and, the first legal companies we went to, they said, you guys are nuts. Like, this is not possible. It is not doable. There are behemoths of companies that are 80 years of age and they're not being able to do it. You're two stooges, no money, you're two tech guys. How are you going to solve payroll problems? But you have to, we committed to a belief because we could see something folks would not. And it's exactly the same problem. Like, Jensen Huang, founder of NVIDIA, it's a success story in the making for 35 years. The company went bankrupt like twice or whatever. He had to fire almost the whole company a few times. Actually did once. And 35 years later, his vision came to life. It's a compounding factor that if you build something long enough, then if it deserves to be alive, if it continues to compound, then it's going to be very big. But it's sort of the whole thing.
I'm curious, actually, Jason, if it's okay with you, if we open it up for other people to have questions too. I'm sure a lot of the founders here would probably get a lot of value from asking Marcelo directly.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
For you.
Yeah.
Who has a question that we'd like to ask Marcelo? Yeah, we can go in the order. Sorry, I saw your hand first. I want to.
Yeah. So you said you're using AI more and more for automation. And how do you deal with hallucinations? Because in this very kind of, sensitive area. Yeah, and you hallucinate on the payroll.
Yeah. I myself hallucinate often. There are parts that need to be deterministic. And so the trick is you to use an element, it's a tool, to build a solution that is deterministic. The tool itself is not deterministic, right? We know that AI, as you said, can hallucinate. You can guide it. You have to know how to guide it. It's called a harness, for instance, that will help the next steps it takes. And then it's also important that you have for instance, have the input and output to validate that deterministic solution is what it's expected to do. So validation is super critical and auditability is super critical. And in a place like ours, in our case, we use it to create the tools that are deterministic. And that helps speed up everything.
But yeah, so thanks for Dan here. I'm building in the global hyperspace.
Yep.
Built APQ of sorts. You mentioned at the start that when you're trying to get from 0 to 1,
Yep.
you're going to all these people and just asking them ordering.
Yep.
How did you think about the MVP for your product? I feel like in SaaS works, like you can build an MVP, but with what you were building, it's very complicated. It's like you have to almost be big.
Yeah.
To build an MVP that
Yeah.
works. So how did you think about that first?
Oh, it was fucking miserable. it was like, the first time, first of all, it was as simple as us going to a customer and say, hey, can I solve this for you? You have this problem? Yes. Can I solve it for you? This is how much it will cost. And most of the times people will say yes. We had the most basic, and it was as basic as, this is the information we need from you. Here's a Google form, and then we'll hand it all. That was it. We would take a Google form, people would put in the information of the employment information. We would then register it, handle the contract, send back the contract. They would sign it. We would register everything. And in the meantime, we were building the platform on top of it. But that's how we started. We started absolutely manually. Everything was manual. But you got to start somewhere. The cool thing is that today you have AI that will do quite a lot of the work for you.
Good. Yeah, sure. If I can ask, what do you think about the future of remote work and what verticals you guys want to focus? Because a lot of jobs, as everybody knows, be gone, right? With AI. Like for remote work, what roles do you think will still be in place?
Well, first of all, our company, even though the name is remote, most of our customers are not remote. They just, either just need payroll in whatever country, or they are employing people that are, distributed, remote, as you were calling it. If you look at the actual, economical indicators and the metrics, it shows that the number of distributed jobs is rising, slowly rising. This means that companies are getting more and more comfortable hiring people in places where they don't have an office. Even if every once in a while they can, come in and go to an office for a day or a few hours per week. As for the future, there's a lot of fear mongering. It doesn't look like we're in a job suppression environment at all. Actually, if it's Jevons paradox. Jevons paradox says that, at an event like AI or a technological event that should suppress some jobs, a lot other jobs will be created because this new technology is so different that it requires a lot more people to do more and different things. And this is what we're seeing. Like all the frontier labs, all the adjacent labs, data centers, all this new economy has been created. So actually, we're still in a high deficit of employment. Actually, there are more jobs than people. So what I think in the future will happen is that a lot of jobs will change. I think that electricians, plumbers, they're all going to make a lot of money because AI is not going to be able to do that. And no one will know how to handle it. But I don't think we're going to have a problem with jobs. And if we are, I think universal basic income will kick in at some point because that's the only way we keep alive.
Yeah.
Or AI takes over and we're dead. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I see another hand over here. Yes.
Hi, I'm Maria from FTI. We do validation, verification, and improvement of the access.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like you guys could need us. But also, I always need flow.
Yeah.
So there's the remote first, our talents everywhere, right? So I was talking a lot to you guys in a field. And I'm wondering, but what I was always missing, the step that I was missing as a tech firm, what I can't accept in this world is European. I'm European.
Yeah.
And as European, every country is culturally so different.
Correct.
And then in compliance, so different.
Yes.
And why I still never used any of, like how you call it, employer of record,
yeah,
of those things. Because in the end, what I still have to deal with is like compliance in these countries, right? So you guys help me, but you're not like taking the burden for me, if that makes sense to you. Probably does. So let's say that I'm born in Austria.
Yeah.
We are like this time, you have to really write down the time.
Yeah.
If my employees don't do it, I go to jail. Kind of.
Yeah.
In Italy, I can't fire it. In France, everyone can do this and that, and I never can fire him. Right?
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, for result, do you see something like a power move where you have the API solved, you have the infrastructure solved, payment goes through the technical, that's amazing.
Yeah.
But can you see like something like this Uber power move, like the Uber founder did, where it's like against all the odds, it's kind of building against, and I'm not sure if you can give an answer to that, right? But building against the law, kind of, to like make these difficulties in compliance in different countries, so that also these cultural differences and even through remote, I don't want to hire in France, right?
Yeah.
Like, you still like that for you growing, or is it something that you would not tackle because anyways you have a good cash flow and it's like, well, whatever?
No, we work with the governments a lot.
Yeah.
The problem with this, Uber, and we have a lot of employees from Uber, so we know Uber went straight ahead with very specific, well-defined subset of the law, right? Especially in car sharing, ride sharing. Employment law is very, very broad. It's employment, it's tax, it's often statutory as well. So it's very, very broad. It tackles, and it's like a sort of an octopus in every government, in every constitution in every country across the world. It is physically impossible for us to say we're going to ignore this, right? Because it's a full tentacle scenario. What we do is we work with as many governments as possible to bring in the new reality of distributed work. It's also important to understand that, just because we are a distributed employer, you guys are a distributed employer, that of course it would be very good for us to ignore a lot of the local laws, but then it would be unfair to the local companies that need to operate within this fashion. The path there is to make sure that the government operates as a whole. And so we're having some success in some countries helping to change things. As you said, we do take the burden, we don't take the liability, right? It's, we have the platform, we make it a lot easier. We take on responsibility as well. If shit hits the fan, we are the ones on the hook, but you have the cost, right? And because ultimately, that's the penalty. If you have a benefit of being able to get the best people in the world, then the downside is that you have to obey by the local rules and regulations. Some countries are leading very much so in this manner, and they're like stepping forward and joining the future. Other countries are still very much stuck in their own ways. It makes like super hard for the local population to be hired by other companies, or companies opening an office there. It's even worse.
Yeah, because even if you can trust the person, I'm not sure if you can trust the cultural background.
And the system itself, right? In some countries, the system is built for the company to be effed at the end.
Could you give examples?
Yeah. So for instance, in some countries, when you fire someone, the reason to firing that person is made public, and the reason why that person leaves is also made public. So, and you could see on a website that, I say, hey, I fired John because he was just not performing. And it shows up in the platform, and also in the same platform shows up that John left because he hated the company. Uh-huh. And so these two things will not match. And so this is created for transparency, but it's a whole shit show. In some countries, it is physically impossible to fire someone that does not want to be fired. You cannot fire the person if the company says no. So the person says, no, I'm not going to go anywhere. And in some countries, you can't even negotiate an exit. Like, it's illegal for you to say, hey, I'm going to give you $1 million if you quit. In some countries, you cannot even say this because you're going to be taken to court, and you're going to get a huge fine, and you still have to keep the person. So, all right.
Just as a question over here. I mean, is there a concrete piece of feedback that you have to a particular country's legal system or something? It's like, hey, obviously, if someone in this room waved a magic wand and changed the legal system or change something about policy or how to...
Holy fuck, we have a huge playbook on a per country basis that we give it to the authorities and say, hey, you could make this better. and often it happens. For instance, when Russia invaded Ukraine, many countries reached out because they knew that we handle mobility and we handle global employment and whatnot. And some countries reached out and said, hey, you guys have visibility into this. How can we make this simple? How can we help people? And because they did not know their own systems, they did not know the extent of their own law. And so in those cases, we it was like 3 countries where we said, okay, so this is how you build a fast track to get people into your country that can work and live here properly. And so we had to draft like a fast track mode on their own law, because the laws were so complex that they themselves did not have the experience to build it up.
Great. And you're just thinking to add to the World Issue Tracker, what's like one of the tickets that you would submit to a country right now?
I think that making it impossible for companies to fire people, it is the dumbest thing for innovation. Because it is an ancient system that is based a lot of entitlement, and a system that does not recognize that companies are the connective tissue that propels the society forward. And there's a lot of ways through which you can protect people. And of course, there are greedy employers that, can be stupid, can be evil. And there are ways that you can legally compensate someone or financially compensate someone, but it's not by tying someone down to a job that's going to make it easier for anyone.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I'm a student at Stanford, and I'm researching about AI agents and how it is influenced by this.
Yeah.
Especially in SaaS.
Yep.
My question to you is, since software is evolving at a very fast pace, what do you think? What are the pivot points for the value capture of companies? For example, and I would like you to answer or formulate with respect to pricing. Would it be a usage-based pricing, tier-based?
Yeah.
And so
everything is moving towards usage-based. Everything is moving towards usage-based. Everything. The sticker price on a per seat is gone. Why? Because software is being written at such a fast pace that most companies are actually building their own solutions internally, and they stop buying seats. Or seat is only, an entry pricing, and then you charge on a per token basis. And then you have to realize that what is that token? What does the token relate to, right? The per seat basis was already a proxy for the perceived value of a piece of software. But now essentially what's happening is that software is being priced down to 0. And what is being priced is the work that is being delivered, the output. And so I think that going forward, what we'll see more is the usage basis or outcome-based pricing. Yeah.
that is to someone on outcome-based pricing. Are there any established frameworks in which companies are kind of using it to measure this as an output and evaluate as a KPI or something?
None. We live in a world where right now it's super exciting, also dreadful, but because nothing is written. Like every time now I hire an exec for any area, I do not accept any playbooks because they don't work anymore. There's a common saying, the head of marketing is not going to fix marketing for you. Right? It's as simple. This means that you have to have a fresh pair of eyes. You have to look at things in the new reality and realize what you're going to be pricing is based on what you deliver. Now, for instance, for us, there's a mix of things that we price based on, but everything is now boiling down to agentic work in a way, and so it'll always be packed down to a modicum analysis of what is the contribution that AI has on your business, because that is what's being commoditized, but also highly expensive and quantified. Meaning, there are businesses like Cursor, for instance, that got bought by SpaceX, where there's still negative margins. Very negative, even though they deliver a lot of impact and a lot of, like, we use them. A lot of great companies use them. They got acquired for $60 billion, and they deliver maximum impact to companies. They're still on like minus 30% or almost, whatever. There's very bad, right? And so you could even argue there that there's a massive disconnect between the outcome delivered and the pricing. Why? Because we're still in this discovery mode where everything we're touching is very expensive. We have limited compute, we have limited hardware, we have limited energy, so everything is now considered rare earths in a way. It boils down to something like me saying, hey, you know what, guys? We can cure cancer using diamonds. Now we're all fucked. Like, it's great, but we're all fucked, right? Because it's insanely expensive, but it's exactly the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. Now you could say, well, it's great that we can cure cancer with diamonds. I can make all kinds of solutions and, pricing models based on this, but, the bare thing is still insanely expensive. So how do you turn that into, a path towards decent pricing? Is you first have to make it a lot more efficient. And so I think that anything that comes out of like pricing these days is going to be very outpaced and very outdated in a matter of like 5 years. Like this token-based discussion, this whatever, I think it's going to be replaced by something more realistic. I don't know what.
As we get to the last maybe like 10, 15 minutes of our time together, and then we can eat, we can network, take pictures, everything. I want to share with you like a few things so that you can think of like some questions, of course, like hiring, managing, firing, like building product. And there's even some non-obvious things. For example, Marcelo's personal life. Again, as I mentioned, like, I think that's so cool. Like he, is an athlete. He likes longevity, like geek culture. Like you can ask about these kinds of things. Predictions. If you have any questions of like prescriptive, like how should I be raising capital right now, or building a network, or building a product, or going to market, like these kinds of things. And then another thing that I want to mention, like please correct me if I'm wrong, but something I'm understanding is like, and this goes back to what we were saying of like solving a really big problem. Like you solve something for like the companies, and then it's like, well, it's a big problem for them, and then wow, it's really a big problem also for the people receiving the payment, and then that is its own topic because people like move around. And then they, like if a company has an exit, then that has like tax implications for people. So, and then now it's almost like at a point where also governments have a pain point that a company like Remote can solve. And they're really happy to work with Remote because it operates at such a large scale that it can come in and kind of like consult them on what they should even be doing. And in some cases, they're like, honestly, it's so broken. Like we'd rather just refer people to Remote and then let them like figure out, because you're doing such a good job of like being a wrapper over all this complexity. So I found that to be really interesting. But yeah, I don't know if you want to, maybe I'm misunderstanding that, but I get the sense that even governments as like partners is like and like even white label parts that use the Remote infrastructure is interesting. Oh, sorry, one more is like all things headless. So like API, SDK, like CLI, NCP, like Marcelo is technically was the CTO of Remote previously. So you can ask a lot of like building for agents, ways you would say like build things people want. It's like building agents want is something that's now like interesting, and that Marcelo is like has an interest in. But yeah, Juan, like can you correct me too? Like if anyone has any questions in those topics, I think those are good ideas.
No, you nailed it.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yes, please.
What's your stack? Which foundational model can you use to use core AI? Do you use, Claude Code or Coda? I'm just curious, like how you've migrated across that path as the industry is growing.
Personally, I experiment pretty much with everything to try to see. And what we realized, and so we were always early adopters across the business. What we realized is that as far as the frontier models, you just gotta pick a horse and go for it, because Opus 4.8 is great. ChatGPT 5.5 is great. Then Fable is great. Then 5.6 is also great. So if you keep switching around for most of the things that you're gonna waste a lot of time. what also is important to realize is that for 80% of the people, the frontier models are not necessary. Like, if you go down to Sonnet or Claude 4.6 or something like that, or ChatGPT 5.0, it's more than enough for 90% of the people. And then for the real edge cases, you can use the more frontier, like the more recent models. And that solves a huge amount of like cost, because it's expensive. Like, we spend more than $10 million a year now on this, much more. And if you're not careful, all of a sudden all your expenditure is going towards this, and needlessly, right? Because you're using a super power tool for something like, hey, summarize this email, but you're paying $5 to summarize an email, where you could be paying like 2 cents.
Sorry.
But we typically hedge more towards Anthropic or ChatGPT.
Do you run evals on those different
levels
so you know where you're wasting?
Correct. So we have many different uses across the company. In some areas, we have externally customer facing, but also internal facing, and different models for very different things. And so we run evals, we check the output, the performance, hallucinations, regressions, so on and so forth. And we continuously monitor and repair, for sure. That's an ongoing basis for everything.
Outstanding.
Someone down here. Yeah.
Just personal.
Yeah.
So I'm a current medical student at Stanford, and I actually am really interested in longevity. That is like the specialty I want to get into for research. It's not currently an accredited specialty. I think
I know.
10 to 20 years it will become an accredited specialty.
Yes.
I want to be at the cutting edge.
Yes.
So what do you personally think is the biggest issue that we should tackle at the policy sphere to help promote this accreditation?
Yeah.
Longevity. It is highly obviously.
It's crazy. It's insane. I work with in Portugal we call it a functional doctor in a way, and he works. We work together on like a full 360 view of my life. So wearables, regular blood work, very extensive blood work, correlation. We try to find out correlation across different things, and also with a deep realization that goes against conventional medicine, that is unstandardized approach to medicine. Meaning, as you know, probably better than most people here and probably better than myself, is medicine and what you're learning is standardized. It's built to adapt to a Gaussian distribution of the population. And so essentially, my sister is also a doctor, but most medical degrees are treating the 60% of the curve. But we're all uniquely different. Meaning, for instance, my reaction to the reaction of my LDL to the food that I eat is probably very different than someone that has, for instance, my wife that has the exact same routine, right? Same, days and experiences and everything. But for instance, my reaction is fundamentally different than hers. And if I take a certain kind of supplement, my reaction is completely different than hers and anyone else. Now, you could have, at the end of the day, even the same people with the same kind of reaction, but if they're treated differently, they will have a very different quality of life. What I mean with this is, what I'm able to do with my doctor is trace a path so that I can live my best life, but it's adjusted to me. I cannot grab this and say, hey, do you also have high LDL? Take my protocol. It will not work, right? Because this person spent some time, and also he's building his own AI models as well, that helps them adjust to a person and adjust, the protocols and all that. And so I think that the key, what I'm trying to say is the key to the longevity of medicine as a discipline is individualism.
Precision medicine.
Correct. And is treating an individual as such, rather than, hey, we're going to look at this person and, just take a statin. And, and it's good because, if you look at the Uber metric that is longevity and life expectation, it went up, but it's stabilizing. Right? It's not, actually in the last few years, it sort of decreased a tiny bit through the pandemic. So what we have to realize now, looking through the blueprint, Brian Johnson and all those things, is to understand that actually there's so much more that we can control, but it takes time, it takes money, and it takes dedication. But most of all, it takes information. Yeah, and also as basic as, I grew up with my parents saying, hey, don't eat junk food, go eat like a sandwich. And I'm like, do you know what bread does to your body? Like, now growing up, it's like my parents thought that a peanut butter sandwich was a healthy snack.
Yeah.
And they thought that out of Portugal that pasta and beef was a healthy meal at night at 9 p.m. just before going to bed, because it's things that someone produce at home and they must be healthy. Now we know this is like 180, right? But most people still don't know this. It's as basic as that. So to your point, I think it's like treat the individual as the individual and make sure that we have the pathways, and doctors in your practice, you're going to have to see a patient every 10 to 15 minutes. This is impossible to trace longevity for anyone within 15 minutes. I think AI will help doing that, but it has to be characterized as a discipline on itself.
Yeah, I just believe that the intersection between precision medicine and AI with, that's my choosing computational medicine.
Yes.
So that intersection of precision medicine and using fake AI to target as the individual genome,
yeah,
rather than full, collective, would definitely help further and advance longevity. And I do believe that we will get to the point where we are going to have that as an accredited specialty, and it's just about, personally, what I get a lot of people like to say whenever I bring this up first, I mentioned this, is that their concern is that this will be, it's tossed back to something I said earlier, that this would only be available to people who work well.
Correct.
Ethically, and something that is being discussed, it's something that we need to be able to figure out. How do we want to approach this? And personally, I think we should still go for it. I think that cutting edge technology should not be implemented just because it's not necessarily efficient today.
Yeah.
But that's where we start getting into problems policy brain. So a lot of policies limited sort of a lot of cutting edge treatments that could be done. It's limited by
correct
many of these issues. So while we do think that AI would help out with all of this, it's about how do we tackle the more ethical and I guess say ethical policies that are put in place to prevent mistakes.
There's a bit of a dichotomy. For instance, if you compare the US or Europe, in the US, it's somewhat expensive. It's a very expensive, to have a doctor looks at all these things, gets the prescriptions, does the exams and whatever tests you need. But then it's somewhat simple to have access to the prescriptions and whatnot. In Europe, it's the opposite. For instance, it's super cheap to do any kind of tests or exams, or it's very, very cheap. On the opposite side, it's very hard for certain prescriptions. For instance, peptides, they're not available at all because it's so regulated. Also sometimes good way because in the US they should be a bit more regulated. But there's certain, for instance, rapamycin that is fairly available or doable here in the US, completely impossible in most of Europe. Completely impossible because it's used for transplants and whatnot. And so it's highly regulated. It's only available through hospitals and whatnot. So there's this dichotomy where everywhere in the world, there's a disconnect of power between analysis and treatment, diagnosis and treatment. And what I'm seeing the best results coming from is mixing the approach. So my functional doctor, usually the way we work is I do tests that go to different countries, and then we put everything together at the end. I think that for now, that's one way to work it out. But I think as precision medicine becomes a thing, it'll fundamentally be, it has to be solved, period.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for asking about that. That's a great question. Can we get just one last question on last week? Do you want to, oh, out of that, feel bad. Can you do a short one? Like each of you do one short one?
Yeah,
One,
please.
Sure.
So when you started, I think this maybe you
Yeah.
covered it, and then we'll done.
Listen up.
So I built an open source tool for product managers.
Yeah.
Now it's so easy to build.
Yeah.
Because before now I'm product manager at all. So it's easy for me to do. When you decide it's okay to start talking about it with people and that benchmark, and you're not hurting your brand because of that. Because suppose I had some past background, and if I start talking about it too soon, what did you just build? Is it still strong? That kind of thing.
Always provide a context. Always, it should do what it says on the label. So if you're just building something and you're not 100% sure it's right, just have people try it out, but disclaim it. Say, hey, working on this. We'd love to have you as a beta user or something like that. Just disclose it, but talk to people. I think the biggest mistake is when we keep things in the wraps. It's like the Schrodinger's product. If it's not there, like if people don't see it, maybe there, maybe not.
It's awesome. Yeah, and then the last one. Check.
I would like to make sure the last say I was just wondering what you see is the biggest stain first when built at their companies and from the systems. How did they fix Girl?
What kind of systems? Any specific tech?
Or just like browsing out what we got.
Only two things matter: intensity and impact. It's sort of the what and the how. Intensity is how you do things, and impact is what comes out of it. And so any system that you have, human, technical, operational, you name it, it should serve those two purposes. It should be intense, and it should have high level of impact. If it's not, then throw it away. I think people overcomplicate. They add too many systems, they add too many processes, they add too many complexity, and they forget what they need to achieve at the end of the day.
Okay. And this was a side question I was curious about. I was wondering if this would definitely have a single configuration of study won't go down as AI advances. Like, would it be better to be there at multiple different things or system there to be both to need to be connected?
That will forever, there will always be the ultimate question. I'm not sure if you ever read Asimov books, but it's like these days it's fundamentally you should read. But at some point he depicts a future where, a doctor is no longer necessarily a doctor. A doctor is someone that is able to operate a medical AI device. So you become really good at prompting in a certain context, right? Today, you are more successful operating an AI if you know how to harness it, if you know how to give it context. In many cases, just blab, and more context, it does better, right? I think that, for instance, if you use an AI to diagnose a mole, the way you'd say it if you're not a doctor is, hey, this looks weird, it's a dot on my skin. And the AI is like, maybe cancer, maybe shit, right? But if you're a doctor, you're going to be able to describe if it has rugged edges, if it has texture, if it's bleeding, if it's whatever. And the output is the same model, and the output is going to be very different. So I think that there's a level of context knowledge that is going to be fundamentally needed in order for you to extract the deepest quality of information that you can get out of the model. But I also think that jack of all trades can be fundamental. Why? Because a lot of the work is not necessarily be needed by specialists. It's going to be needed by people that can very quickly reach the best tool for the job at hand. And I think that's, think about it as someone that can operate a very complex, very expensive AI. It's someone that can operate many very cheap models of AI. I think both cases will always be needed at different points.
Okay, one. So 2 quick things. So gifts, we brought for everybody a sticker pack. We still bought it. I mean, it's not the greatest gift, but we wanted to get everybody a sticker pack and also a remote. This is a zipper pull. You can put it on like a jacket. And then we actually have the best, I think it's the best gift ever for Marcelo for doing this. And I want you to open it actually here in front of everyone. It comes with a little story. So in 1937, they did some things with the Golden Gate Bridge, the Red Bridge in San Francisco, of course. And then in 1997, there were some adjustments that were made, including, this is kind of the sad part of the story, but adding the suicide net and also taking off some parts and then putting the new ones. When they did that, there was an artist in San Francisco that saw it in the news, and he said, this is a historic moment. What are they going to do with all that metal? Are they going to throw it away? What's going to happen? And then he reached out to them and said, I'll take as much of it. I'll take the whole bridge if you'll give it to me. I'll take everything. He quit his job, and he full-time just became an artist. This is in 1997. 2026, there's still a couple pieces left. This is one of those pieces of the Golden Gate Bridge.
Oh, wow.
And I asked him, are you going to keep doing it? And he said no, because I asked them if we could have some kind of relationship. My whole career for 30 years has been to do it. And they said, no, of course not anymore. This is now, it will be taken care of differently moving forward. So this is the Golden Gate Bridge.
Thank you so much.
I said, this is call us.
Yeah, so if you open it, I think it's cool. It's got a little certificate of authenticity, and you can see.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Explain to me how I'm going to convince TSA that I'm not trying to steal a bridge. That's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, okay,
Super cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And please drink our coffee, drink our drinks, eat our food, and we need to be out of here in 30 minutes.
Do it fast.